The Fool and the Flying Ship. Where was I? Once a while ago, there was an old peasant and his wife and their 3 sons. 2 of the boys were clever, like a knife so sharp. But the 3rd son, well, he was not. That's being nice. He was a fool. He was like a board without a nail, you know what they say. Now it came to pass in those days that the Tsar of all Russia issued a proclamation to every cottage in the land that whosoever should build a flying ship, one that could sail throughout the blue skies this way and that, hither and yan and hither. I don't know where hither is, but I hear it's nice. They would win the hand of his lovely daughter, the princess. The 2 clever brothers were naturally eager to try their luck, and so they each resolved to set off. Their father gladly provided them with finer clothes than he had ever worn himself and gave his blessing for their journey. Their mother made up pampers of food, soft white roast, cooked meats, bottles of corn brandy, and a little potato latke maybe for later. The fool saw all this, and he said he would go along too, for he wished to receive such fine things and his father's blessing. But his cool brothers only knocked his cap off and teased him. "Imagine the Tsar's daughter marrying that sucker-ship," they said as they were leaving. Even after they had walked a good ways down the road, the poor fool could hear them guffawing loudly. Still, for all their cleverness, they were never heard from again. Some time passed. Not much, not a little. What am I, a watch? And the fool decided his time to leave had come. But when he told his mother, she only scoffed. "Ha!" she said. "With your fine luck, it's only a matter of time before you're eaten by a pack of wolves." But his father was of a different mind. Being like a father, he took kind of a stand. "If he's eaten, then he's eaten. It's high time we allowed the boy to learn by his own mistakes." "Your father might have a kind heart towards you," his mother said, being the good woman that she was. "But as for me, if you're eaten by wild beasts, don't even think about coming home." And with that, she gave him some old rush he had thrown into a sack, and he had left. The fool had not gone far into the woods, not that far, but far enough, when he met an ancient wisp of a man leaning on a rude crutch. The man had a wild icicle of a beard, and a pair of lively white eyebrows that leapt like snow hares when he spoke. "Where goest thou, young fellow?" he asked.
"Truth to be told, I am up to marry the Tsar's daughter, but first I must build a flying ship."
"How do you do that?" the old man asked. The fool had not thought that far, because he was a fool, and they never think that far. "Well then," said the old man, "let's rest a bit and have a bissel to eat."
"I'm ashamed to offer you what I have here," said the fool. "It's good enough for me, but certainly not served as a meal to which one has guests. Although if you're hungry, I'll be more than happy to share what I have."
And so he began to unpack his meager fare. But as he did so, his eyes blossomed wide with surprise. There was wine and corn brandy and soft white roast and all manner of cooked meats and sausages, and thrilling thinking and delicate cheeses, the kind of cheeses that just take you by the nose and lead you around the house. And there was even a tin of caviar made from a pair of fish that swam only in champagne, and all the plates were made of the finest silver and engraved with scenes of soldiers in battle, so lifelike that if one looked closely, one could imagine one heard the sound of gunfire. The 2 of them dined on this great banquet until they could eat no more, and before long the fool fell sound asleep against a large tree. When he awoke, he discovered that he was not leaning against a tree, no, but against the smooth hull of a great ship. And the old man, the El Takaka, he was nowhere to be seen. My,
"I can hardly remember being so industrious," thought the fool. "But look what I've done!"
And he danced happily around the ship, admiring his handiwork. He quickly jumped aboard and seized the tiller. Instantly, the ship leapt into the air and shot over the tree tops, heading towards hither. Before long, the fool spotted a very thin fellow carrying a roasted pig. "Good day to you, Uncle Skinny," said the fool, in a way that only fools can, that makes you laugh and wonder at the same time. "Where are you going?" "Want to buy some dinner." "But there's a banquet under your nose," the fool called out. "Really?" said the man. "Where?" "Oh, this is just a scrap, hardly a mouthful."
"I'm on my way to marry the Tsar's daughter. There should be a good BLT there. Come aboard, big guy."
So the big eater climbed aboard and they sped off, a little heavier in the hull, but they got off the ground. They flew on until, looking down at the earth below, the fool saw a man with ears the size of soup plates, lying with one of his ears pressed to the ground.
"Good day to you!"
the fool shouted out to him.
"What are you doing down there?"
"Ah! Not so loud! I am listening to an ant coughing in Ethiopia, and it's quite a terrible cough that he has."
"Why, you have rather good hearing to hear insects coughing all the way in Ethiopia."
"Yes," said the man, "and it would be a real cinch if only his wife weren't such a terrific snorer. What a racket! I wonder he's not dead from such an infernal hubbub."
"Welcome aboard," said the fool. "I'm going to the wedding of the Tsar's daughter, and you're sure to get an earful there."
And so the man came aboard and they sped off over the hill. His ears were picking up a little wind, so they had to tie them back. Before long they spotted a man hopping along on one foot with the other tied behind his head.
"Ahoy there, Lord Pegleg," cried the fool. "Why are you hopping along on one foot?"
"And what would you have me do on one foot? Pirouette?" the man asked. "Besides, if I were to untie my other foot, I would move too fast for anybody to see me, for I would trip over the equator in one stride." "Oh, that's pretty quick," the fool said. "If you think that's quick," the man replied, "you should have seen me before the old arthritis set in."
"Come aboard," said the fool. "We're heading for the wedding of the Tsar's daughter. He's sure to require a speedy message yet."
And off they went. They flew on, which is more on than the on before, but who's keeping track? It's a story. Until down by the roadside they saw a man aiming a gun whose barrel was the length of 2 plow horses and a clever shackle. "Ahoy there, William Tell's kid," the fool shouted.
"Can you tell us what you're aiming at?"
"Well, you see," the man said, rubbing his jaw, "there's an ant in Ethiopia with a terrible cough. I should like to put him out of his misery."
"But his wife's loud snoring, that's what's keeping him ill,"
the fool replied. "Yes, of course. She's the one I'm aiming for." "Take your place among us," said the fool.
"The Tsar is sure to require such a skilled marksman."
So the sharpshooter hopped aboard and they sped away. As they were traveling, they saw a shrunken weakling of a man stoop behind a head of hair so great that he groaned with the effort of carrying it.
"Ahoy there, Captain Hunchback," the fool shouted. "What sort of burden have you got there?"
"Oh, it's no burden at all," he replied wearily. "It's only my strength I'm carrying. There's quite a lot of it, as you can see."
"Well, we're going to the wedding of the Tsar's daughter," said the fool, "and they're sure to need a strong man there. In any case, they're sure to have a pair of shears for a decent haircut. Climb aboard, Samson."
But the weakling could not manage it himself, so the fool and the sharpshooter got down and lent him a hand, pulled him up onto the ship, and they sailed across the countryside. They didn't meet anyone else on their journey, and after some time had passed, not much and not a little, they came to the palace of the Tsar himself. The Tsar, who was at that moment eating his dinner, which, tightwad that he was, consisted of no more than a tiny bowl of borscht without any sour cream, which is a meal that you should not have ever. He and his daughter, the princess, looked out of the window to see where the noise was coming from, and saw the strange ship descending, with its Magushagan crew making crude gestures and waving boisterously at them. One of the Tsar's servants, a miniature genius interested in marrying the Tsar's daughter himself, was watering his mechanical bear at the fountain when the ship landed. Now the Tsar thought that there was no one in the world worthy of his daughter's hand in marriage, although he secretly hoped that the Prince of the Moon would come in a flying ship. But if no one came after a certain time, well, he promised the small servant his daughter's hand. On seeing the flying ship, the seventh immediately perceived that the ship's crew were just a rough group of simple peasants, not the Prince of the Moon, and he quickly went running into the Tsar's dining room, huffing and puffing.
Has the Prince of the Moon come for the hand of my lovely daughter?
The Tsar asked the seventh, beaming with pride. Far from it, your majesty, replied the winded egghead. It's just a group of simple mujiks. Mujiks, every one of them.
Mujiks! Right! What's a mujik?
Peasants, your majesty.
Peasants?
No! Peasants. Just a group of lowlifes from the countryside, and the leader of this riffraff claims he's fulfilled the requirements of your proclamation with that ship of his, and he's asked for the hand of your daughter, the princess.
Oh?
Said the Tsar, visibly shaken, and visibly moving too.
Could I see that proclamation again?
Yes, your majesty, said the smarty pants, immediately producing the parchment. There it is, in black and white. Whosoever could build a flying ship, the one could sail through the blue skies this way and hither and yon and hither. I don't know where hither is, but here is nice. They would win the hand of my lovely daughter, the princess.
Whoops!
Well, I suppose we're in a jam, all right. So the Tsar, the princess, and the servant sat for a while in complete silence, considering their dilemma. I have it, your majesty, the servant cried. Perhaps you could send this rogue and his gang 3 impossible tasks, ones they can never fulfill.
Now we're getting somewhere, said the Tsar. Like what?
You could ask them to eat 1,000 loaves of bread. This nearly tore the Tsar in two. He wanted desperately to rid himself of this unwanted suitor, but as a tightwad, the idea of parting with 1,000 loaves of bread was more than he could bear. But in the end, to get rid of the fool, he agreed. So the servant went to the fool, who was turning somersaults and cracking jokes with his party and standing by the fire doing party tricks that I can't talk about, and brought him into the palace.
Aha! Said the fool loudly on seeing the princess. My bride-to-be, what a vision you are. Oh, and my soon-to-be father-in-law, may I call you Pop?
Pop? Said the Tsar, reddening. It is His Majesty's desire that all suitors first fulfill 3 small tasks before any wedding plans be discussed, the servant said. He then produced a huge volume, nearly as large as he was, and pretended to consult it carefully. Yes. To begin with, you and your hick crew must first eat no less than 1,000 loaves of bread.
I'm afraid none of my men is very hungry right now, but perhaps I can persuade one of the men to try with me.
So he summoned the eater from the ship, and no sooner than the loaves were set before them, they were boom! Gone! That's it.
Oh, I think I have some loaves coming to me yet,
the eater said, anxiously.
I'm afraid it only tasted like 900, really. I'm quite sure of it.
Now the Tsar was more upset than ever, as you can imagine, and his daughter, the princess, was biting a lip. But the servant was as sly as a fox, and he again thought quickly. Excellent! Excellent! And now, he said as he pretended to read from the book, let me see. Yes. You must journey down to Africa and fetch a piece of the equator. Then the Tsar's daughter will be yours. And he and the Tsar chuckled at the fool, who seemed to be thinking the matter over. A piece of the equator, eh? The fool said. Any particular size piece? The Tsar and the servant looked at each other uncomfortably. The size? Stammered the servant. Not really, but you must bring it before sundown and not a minute later.
Well, you probably know what it's like to run about on a full stomach, the fool replied calmly. So if you have no objection, I'll ask one of my courtiers to make the journey.
So he arose from the table, went into the courtyard, and described the situation.
This is my affair, said the runner, who stood up quickly, untied the leg from behind his head, began to wiggle it to get the sniffness out. And the very instant he touched the ground, it went vroom! God! He was out of sight. And just as he predicted, he tripped over the equator in his first stride and fell headlong into deepest Africa.
When he got up, he immediately retied his leg and began to hop along the equator's length, for he hoped to score out a nice handsome piece. Now, as everybody knows who's been there, the equator is a bright blue color with worm-like imperfections here and there, because it's been drawn so many times on a map. When he came upon a part of it that he was free of imperfections, was so brilliantly blue that it made the sky look as red as a rose in comparison, he bit off a nice piece the size of a young pig, put it in his pocket, and sat down against the tree to take a nap. During the time that the runner was gone, the fool was conversing with the Tsar and the princess. But after some time, though, he wondered where his friend was, and so went out to the ship. "Ah-oh," said the hero, with his ear to the ground. "Our swift pal has fallen under a tree. I can hear him snoring, and there's a filly asleep on the hair on the top of his head, just 10 rows back from the widow's peak. 12, and the flea is snoring too." "I see him," said the sharpshooter. "I see him." "Who? Lord Pegleg?" asked the fool. "No, the flea. I now see Pegleg just below the flea. Leave it to me." The sharpshooter quickly picked up his rifle, aimed carefully, and lying for wind, curvature, and spin of the earth, continental drift, and the expansion of the universe, and the chance that he might sneeze, squeezed the trigger. The bullet hit the flea squarely amidships, which is to say it struck him on the third button of his brocade flea's vest, dead bullseye, and ricochet ka-ping off the embossed buckle on his high-heeled shoe. Not a bad shot. The sound was so loud that it immediately woke the runner, who, seeing that the sun was about to set, quickly put both feet on the ground faster than 63 speeding bullets, arriving at the Tsar's palace with the equator safely in his pocket. He gave it into the fool, who immediately brought it to the Tsar and his daughter. Now the Tsar began growing quite pale, and his daughter was crossing and uncrossing her eyes unattractively. But again the servant thought quickly. "Well, this is all well and good," he said, winking at the Tsar, "but there is one more task listed which you must fulfill." And again he pretended to read from that large book. "Ah, yes, you must find a bird that cannot fly, yet loves to swim, and has not a single hair on his feather on his body, and you must fetch it here by sunup tomorrow. No pressure. Good night." So the fool returned to the ship and related the situation. Now, naturally, the eater was aware of all the birds in the world that could be eaten, and he said that he had heard of such birds as the servant described, but he said that they lived at the very bottom of the world, far beyond the equator, where it was very cold. So the sharpshooter immediately looked in that direction, with a little squinting, said, "Aha! I see some birds who cannot fly and have no feathers, but when they dive under water, they stay underneath, and I cannot see them swimming." So the hero put his ear to the ground, and with a little strain he said, "I can hear those birds with no feathers who cannot fly, and I hear their wings flapping on the water as they swim." That settled it. Of course, the runner was again eager to make the journey and fetch the bird, and he was already beginning to untie his leg, but the sharpshooter objected strongly. "No, no, 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 no!" And he added more, "No!" He said to them, "You see, I have run out of bullets. If the runner should fall asleep again, it will be quite powerless to rouse him. He simply cannot go." So they sat there silently thinking. But just 1/10 of a second before they were about to give up, the hairy weakling clambered out of the ship's hull and blinked at the twilight, for he'd been sleeping soundly below deck since their arrival. "I would say it's high time I puffed up," he announced to them weakly. Yes, time to puff up indeed." And he began to inhale quite vigorously. So vigorously, in fact, that anything that was not tied down was soon sucked into his lungs. And as he did this, a very strange thing took place. His puny body began to inflate, while at the same time his oppressive mane began to retreat back into his head, and by the time he was through, he was as big and strong as he had been weak and small, and his head was as shiny as a shaved melon. "I thought you'd look better with a haircut," said the fool, turning a handspring. The puffer then opined that if they were unprepared to travel to the South Pole, they would have to bring the South Pole to them. And so, grabbing a hold of a piece of turf, he began quickly hauling the countryside towards himself like a sailcloth. The fool and his crew watched in absolute amazement as houses and whole villages appeared on the horizon like ships coming towards them, and then disappeared into the pile behind the puffer. As daylight left them, entire countries passed before their eyes, their inhabitants going about their lives as though everything were completely normal. Whole families passed by them. This is called traveling at the speed of light, or the theory of relatives. And there was one man named Einstein who saw all this and went, "Whoa, what an idea." But that's another story. On and on it went, faster and faster the papa pulled, never stopping. He pulled and he pulled, all through the night, on and on and on. Finally, just as he was running out of strength and the first rays of the sun were beginning to redden the horizon, the South Pole skidded to a halt right in the center of the Tsar's courtyard, and his job was done. Now when the Tsar woke up, he immediately looked out of his window. There in the courtyard below he beheld hundreds and hundreds of penguins, which is Eskimo for tuxedo, waddling about and swimming in the courtyard, while behind the puffer lay the entire earth in a single wrinkled pile. And who should be standing on his head on top of the South Pole in the center of the courtyard? That's right, who indeed but the fool himself. Of course the Tsar shook with fear at all this he saw, for what could he do? Without a moment's hesitation, he threw open his bedroom window and shouted down to the fool, "Congratulations, my dear son-in-law, she's all yours!" And so the fool and the princess were married that very morning, and the Tsar gave the fool half of his kingdom, which is a nice deal, and fired his pint-sized servant who ran off to the mountains and opened a hotel, while the companions in the flying chute took up the best quarters in the palace. They were forever by his side, cracking jokes, singing songs, and forming the first men's club, and they and the fool were very happy. Oh, and as for the princess, well, she got used to it.